Hi, I'm Roberta Lerman, and Ann and I want to invite you to the next women's group meeting, which will be the last, I think it's the 23rd or 24th? The 24th. It will be here in person. We're going to try to wear masks and stay socially distant, but I still have to get out the email to everybody, so please spread the word to save the date. Friday, September 24th. It's about 7 o'clock. Thank you.
What a gentleman. Just a heads up that there's no Beacon Youth Group meeting today. This is mostly going out into the ether. We will be meeting again next Sunday afternoon, and if you need details, you can contact me if you know my email address, or feel free to email the office and they will forward it to me. Okay? Thanks.
If we're supposed to touch this. John Mowbray on behalf of Facilities and Grounds, and next Saturday is the third Saturday of the month, so it's a work day. If you can spare a couple hours, 1 hour, half hour, whatever you got, from about 9 to 12. You can work inside, various things we can put you to work doing, or if you like to work outside, we got plenty to do out there as well. So next Saturday, 9 to 12. Thank you.
Hey, good morning. Martha Kirby, the board president. I wanted to let you know to watch your email this week. Next week is our water communion, which we weren't able to do. I think we did it online last year. I can't even remember. But this year we're trying in person, but we're also going to offer opportunities for those of you at home to drive by and bring your water here. We're going to be working on planning that this afternoon. There's probably going to be a time next Saturday during workday. So you can come by and do your little water thing and then help us with workday or not. That's not a requirement, but watch your emails for that. And the 26th, the following Sunday, is the first official Sunday that our new part-time minister will be in the pulpit. She's going to be participating a little bit in water communion, but we're not counting that. Our welcome, Reverend Tracy, will be Sunday the 26th. So we're planning a celebration. And it's a big step forward, and it's a new journey, a new transition into how this shared ministry will work. So we'd like to have as many people as possible here to welcome her on the 26th. So thank you.
Thank you, Martha. For opening words, in thinking about the service today and our speaker, Reverend James Coffin, I thought about the values of Unitarian Universalism, and we speak the principles many times. The principles are on that big picture board over there, and from time to time, Unitarians in Boston, the mother church, has gathered people and has updated them, and I want to make some comments on the updating of those principles. The principles have served us well since 1985, wrote a Reverend Walter Jones. But we are not suggesting that the committee produced a statement for the ages. Over the decades, he says, we should not be surprised at some restiveness. On the one hand, some are uneasy with what they see as a kind of creeping creedalism in the way we use the principles. On the other, there is a perception of incompleteness with important, arguably necessary, empowering assumptions about cosmic reality and our particular place in it that principles leave unsaid. Still others, he says, are dissatisfied with what they see as excessive emphasis on the individual, so that the creative nature of community and interdependence are only tardily and inadequately acknowledged. Nonetheless, no one at the moment is suggesting any drastic revisions, and yet the commitment to a free and responsible search for truth and meaning, as the fourth principle puts it, carries the seeds of its own obsolescence. Just consider, well into the 20th century, think 1950s, 60s, 70s, I was just a kid. Our Unitarian predecessors used to proclaim and teach that we believe in the fatherhood of God, the brotherhood of man, the leadership of Jesus, salvation through character, and the progress of mankind onward and upward forever. Today we would have difficulty saying those words, I think. Yet the people who did say them were just as intelligent, as in tune with their times, and committed to reason and free thinking as we are. In 2030, when everybody presumably will have perfect vision, our current principles and purposes may also be perceived to have inadequacies that demand radical rewriting, and therein lies our genius. It's a process that is rightly called renewal or regeneration, and that is what has not changed, and let us hope will remain unchanged in 2030 or even 100 years from now. And for our opening music, we have Wait Now My Senses. The words are by Thomas Mickelson, and if we see the performer, it will be a piano by Brian Kinney and a vocal by
Wake now my senses and hear the earth call. Feel the deep power of being in awe. Keep with the web of creation your vow. Giving, receiving as love shows us how. Wake now my reason, reach out to the new. Join with each pilgrim who quests for the true. Honor the beauty and wisdom, suffer thy limit and praise the sublime. Wake now compassion, give heed to the cry. Voices of suffering fill the wide sky. Take as your neighbor both stranger and friend, praying and striving their hardship to end. Wake now my conscience with justice thy guide. Join with all people whose rights are denied. Take not for granted a privileged place. God's love embraces the whole human race. Wake now my vision of ministry clear. Brighten my pathway with radiance here. Mingle my calling with all who will share. Work toward a planet transformed by our care.
Eleanor Hemingway. Please join with me. And the warmth of love. and we follow this with our commitment to with our affirmation. Love is the spirit of this church, and service is its gift. This is our great covenant, to dwell together in peace, to seek truth in love, and to help one another. So this is a moment for us to greet everyone and say hello once again, to welcome our guests particularly. Recently, as Martha mentioned, we called Reverend Tracy Barrett to accept a position as part-time minister to the UUF, thus adding to our lay-led tradition the skills and experiences of the Unitarian Universalist ministry, and we're excited about that addition. As always, our services, topics, and speakers vary greatly from one service to another, so we invite everyone to experience that and to come many times. For joys and concerns, this is the opportunity for us to, those who wish to address us from this mic regarding anything that's on your mind that is germane to us. We want to hear from you. We invite you to come to the mic, and if you wish, you may take off the mask while you are speaking from the mic.
Joey Cole, I have a small concern. If you would just send healing thoughts to Grace. She had minor but still dental surgery on Friday, and she's recovering. She's doing well, though. She even remembered her math homework, so.
Karen Cowden, I just wanted to thank all who taught me how to sew when I was a young girl, through my mother, my Girl Scouts, or my aunt who put up with all my shenanigans, because yesterday I used those skills to sew our boat seats.
Yes, this is Harvey Lerman. I had a big joy last weekend. My wife and I drove down to St. Petersburg for a chess tournament that was there. And the chess tournament was named the Harvey Lerman Florida Chess Championship. And it'll probably be held that way for many years. Now, some of the people, when they first heard that that was going to be the name of the tournament, they thought I might have died. But I was there, so they saw that I didn't. Now, one of the things they had there, they had a man and a woman who have been doing this a long time, that they make T-shirts right there. Roberta can probably say how they do it, but they make T-shirts, and so they've been making the Harvey Lerman T-shirt for this, and a lot of people were coming in and buying them, and then during the performance, when I had during the tournament before it started or something, I had an opportunity to address everybody and thank them for honoring me by this and telling them that I'd probably be able to help them, and I had some chess books to give away, and because I have a whole collection of books that haven't been used yet, so I gave a few, 3 of them away. And let's see. Oh, yes, and nowadays chess is very popular. There's a lot of chess tournaments starting up, and they're breaking records. Not only based on the fact that they haven't only played by online, which was fast chess. They can now get out and really play chess, and so they were very happy with that, and it was breaking all records. There were over 220 players at this tournament breaking records. So that was very good. Yeah, I know. Well, I wanted to say something else. I think everybody who might not have seen it in the paper or anything, but the company from was in the United States and started in the United States, and now it's being processed by France and a lot of other countries. They've got a method of creating new energy that'll be able to, within 20 or 30 years, really solve our energy problem throughout. So even though only the young ones here will probably get benefit from that, but I think we'll be successful in doing that. Thank you.
Hi, I'm River. I just wanted to ask that everyone keep my family, but especially my grandma, in your thoughts and prayers today. Today marks 3 months since my great-grandmother passed away, and my poor grandma has an injury, and she's at home alone. So, thank you.
Barry London. I wanted to speak briefly about Lynn Schmidt, big tall guy. Roy and Barry have been looking after him when his doctors aren't around. But Lynn has had surgery that's on his spine that's relieved pressure, and he can now walk. But it turned up something else. They've discovered he's got a bit of problems with his heart. The pressure's low, and he's recovering from the back so that they can do some exploratory, take a look at the heart and see what needs to be, adjustments need to be made there. And so for the Time for All Ages, we're going to be assisted in that with the Reverend Jim.
Okay, thank you very much. I foolishly volunteered for this. Not quite sure what motivated that, but we have those moments. What was I thinking? But I told Judith I had a story I could tell, and the sermon title, or the presentation title that I have today, is about smells, and so I thought I'd tell a story about smells. And I grew up on a farm in Missouri, and there's a little animal we have in Missouri, much more than is here in Florida, and that is called a skunk. And skunks are somewhat known for the fact that they can smell kind of badly if they happen to be in that kind of a mood. And so one day we were working out in the barn, and there was an area where we had had a lot of bales of hay stacked for a long time. And we decided that we were going to move the hay out of that area of the barn into another place where it was more readily usable. And so we were picking up bales of hay, and my father and I were working together there, and we had 2 dogs with us. These were collie dogs, or kind of collie dogs. That was the predominant feature of the dogs anyway. Queenie and Lassie, and they were there. My father picked up a bale of hay, and a skunk ran out from under the bale of hay. And the skunk, kind of ran around just a little bit and found a little hole in the hay that he could run into and disappear again. And we picked up another bale of hay, and the skunk ran out again. And this time, one of the dogs saw the skunk, and she was quite fast, and she lunged for the skunk, and she got almost to the skunk and tried to grab it, and the skunk stopped as skunks do and kind of hunched his back a bit, and he sprayed. Now, I was probably as far as away from the skunk as Barry is from me right now. My father was not only closer, but he was in the line of fire. So I have smelled the smell of skunk on numerous occasions. You know, as a kid growing up, you know, it was quite common. You'd drive out on an evening and you'd smell that smell in the air, and it's very strong and very pungent. And so when you're that close to the skunk spray, it is really, really strong. And when there's some of the actual spray that gets on your clothes, it's really quite amazing. And so my father went out, and he couldn't stand the smell of his clothes. He took them off, and so my mother said, well, rinse them off outside and see if you can get rid of some of the smell, and then later we'll go ahead and wash them. And so we washed them outside by hand, and we couldn't get rid of any of the smell. And eventually we just decided there's no hope, and we burned the clothes just to get rid of the smell because it was so strong. Now the talk that I'm going to give to the adults today is about the whole idea of smell and how life is actually, figurative at least, kind of creating smells, good and bad. And bad smells are really hard to get rid of. And that experience with the skunk told us just how hard it is to get rid of that smell. And so we can live life in such a way that we make the world smell better, that we make life more beautiful for people, or we can live life in such a way that the stink that we leave behind, the stench that we leave behind, not literally, but just by the way we behave, leaves people feeling worse and leaves people feeling that they wish they had never met us because it hasn't been a good experience and they'd like to forget it, but stench tends to linger. So just think about that as you're making decisions about whether to do something or not in relationship to other people, and is it going to make them feel that they have smelled some great perfume, or is it going to make them think that a skunk got next to them? Think about it.
It is now time for our interlude and offering. Today the plate is going to be what? Habitat for Humanities. You heard it on the right, going once, going twice. And so we and Martha will let us. we have one more joy and concern from virtual, and Martha will let us know what that is about.
Yes, I felt the vibration, but it was a little, I missed it. Candace Thompson, we have 13 people watching on Zoom this morning in a Zoom watch party. Candace believes she has found a second home in the Chicago neighborhood of Andersonville, which is the area her Swedish ancestors settled in when coming over. But she'll still be spending time in Florida. So, joy for Candace. Maybe a concern for us. We'll miss you.
So for our presentation today, we welcome back an old friend who needs no introduction. He's been here many times. I always look forward to the Reverend James Coffin. He is the Executive Director of the Interfaith Council of Central Florida. Reverend?
Thank you very much, Barry. It's always nice to be with you, and it's always a pleasure to come back and be with you again. And as you see on the screen, the title of my presentation today is Your Mission. This should bring back memories for those of more years, of a program on television called Mission Impossible. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to make the world smell better. Now, sometimes presentations are given with the idea that it's going to enlighten you on some great, deep, profound matter. You're going to gain whole new insights into what life is all about, and so on. This is not one of those presentations. Okay, this is very simple. This is a kind of a rah session. This is kind of let's whip up the enthusiasm in the troops and go out and conquer the world kind of thing, as opposed to I've never thought about that before, that kind of thing. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to make the world smell better. And then after I put that title down, Martha had asked me if I would speak. I sent her the title, and then I thought, no, that's not quite right, because I remember something I'd read in literature about the great Samuel Johnson, who was a great user of words. And one time, Samuel Johnson was on a stagecoach in a crowded stagecoach. It was totally full. It was hot, really hot weather. Everybody was sweating. And he'd been wearing the same clothing for a long time. And the woman who was sitting next to him, rather indiscreetly, said, "Dr. Johnson, you smell." And he said, "No, ma'am. You smell, I stink." And so having remembered that, I thought, okay, I did the title just a little bit incorrect here. Because maybe what I should have said, instead of to make the world smell better, I'm not saying I hope their noses work better. What I meant was that maybe make the whole world stink less. Maybe that's what I actually meant to say. So anyway, I wanted to share with you a text from the Christian scriptures, and I feel free to do that because I know that your published acceptance of sources says, Jewish and Christian teachings which call us to respond to God's love by loving our neighbors as ourselves. So I said I've got permission to quote the New Testament, and so I'm going to do so. And actually, I'd like to commend you for the fact that you added a bit of a caveat on this, where you said that you would accept Jewish and Christian scriptures, but they actually had to make life better for other people. You weren't just out there to accept anything and everything, but that which was going to improve human relationships. And I think that's really a truly significant thing that we need to think about is life is made up of human relationships. I have faith that there's a God, but I know I have a neighbor. And so it's important for me to have this faith relationship with, whatever I see out there, but whether I believe in a God or whether I don't, I know I have a neighbor. And so this little passage, and I haven't heard it quoted very often, it says this, and it's taken from 2 Corinthians 2:14 and 15, And I'm kind of wresting it from context a little bit, but I don't think any of you are going to take me to task for that, because you're not going to be concerned about my theology that much. It says, "But thanks be to God who always leads us as captives in Christ's triumphal procession and uses us to spread the aroma of the knowledge of Him everywhere. For we are to God the pleasing aroma of Christ." And so I thought about that just a little bit. And now, obviously, the values to which you subscribe and the ultimate realities that you perceive are not necessarily the same ultimate realities that I perceive as a Christian. So I'm not saying that you should be ambassadors for Christ. I'm saying you should be ambassadors for the values and the cosmic perceptions that you have, and you should try to make the world a better place by doing it. And it's like an aroma. It actually makes a difference in the world. People feel better when they've been around those who they know care about them, who love them, who are concerned about them. And so life is just much better that way. Now, the interesting thing is, when we talk about God, or when we talk about spiritual things, in a sense, we have no good vocabulary to do it. Because spiritual things, just the word itself, spiritual, you're talking about something that's a spirit. A spirit is elusive. You know, a spirit and wind are kind of the same word in the Greek. And so this spirit is elusive. So how do we talk about something that we've never experienced, you know, not in a tangible sense? And how do we talk about something that is ethereal in nature? And so we try to compare it to something that we have experienced. We go from the known and try to talk about the unknown on the basis of the known. And so we call this analogy. You know, it's kind of like this. This is an analogy. You know, well, I believe God is like this, or I believe that the spiritual realm is like this. But since we have not actually experienced it in the same way that we experience our everyday life, we have to make comparisons. And it's interesting that the word compare is actually, you know what a paring knife is. You know, you cut away things on a piece of fruit or a piece of vegetable. So compare is, we're going to take this and we're going to take that and we're going to cut them down together. We're going to get to the core. We're going to get to the essence of what it is. We're going to do it simultaneously. So if I'm describing a fruit to you that you've never had, I say, well, it's kind of like a carrot, you know, and I begin to describe that, but it's not exactly like a carrot. It's just something you've never experienced before. So we use these comparisons, or we use a metaphor, or we use even a parable. Many of the great thinkers of the past and present, both, used parables to get ideas across. And one of the beauties of a parable is that you have kind of plausible deniability. You can say something to people where they get the idea of what you're talking about, but you don't actually say it. And the actual word parable is made up of two Greek words, and one is para, which means alongside. So if we talk about paramilitary, we're saying it's something that works kind of alongside the military. It's not actually the military, but it's alongside the military. That's the first part of the word of parable. And then the second part is ballo, from which we get the word ball. And ballo means to throw. Okay, so a parable is something that throws something alongside of something else. So you have a story you want to tell. You have a message you want to get across, but you don't actually say that message. You throw that message alongside something else. And of course, the beauty is then that you can kind of see it in a different way. And Jesus used that parable idea a lot because he knew that he would get in trouble otherwise. In the Jewish scriptures, in the Hebrew scriptures, there's a beautiful parable told by the prophet Nathan David has just seen another man's wife, has decided that she would be interesting, and he pursued his interest. And it's a long story, but she got pregnant. This is Bathsheba. You've probably heard the story. And so David commits adultery with Bathsheba, and lo and behold, she gets pregnant. So this creates a little bit of a problem. And so what are they going to do? Well, he decides that the best thing he could do is to get rid of her husband as quickly as possible so that she would be eligible to marry, and then they could just have a premature child, and everything would be hunky-dory, peachy-creamy. And so he arranges with his general to make sure that Bathsheba's husband, Uriah, is in the heat of the battle. He gets killed, and then David, just happens to comfort this grieving widow by marrying her. And a few months later, a baby is born, and they think they've kind of covered it all. And the prophet Nathan comes to David, and he tells him a story. And he says, one time there was a family that had a little pet lamb. And I hear that story, and we always had a few orphan lambs every year from our flock of sheep, and I know how close we were to these orphan lambs, and so I relate to this story really well. So there's a family who have a little pet lamb, just one lamb. And they love that lamb, and they play with that lamb, and the lamb is just part of the family. And so the prophet Nathan is telling this story to David. And he said, but there was a rich neighbor who had flocks and herds and had hundreds of sheep and hundreds of lambs and hundreds of cows and hundreds of calves. And he had absolutely everything going for him. And he had a guest who came, and they said, we need to have some roasted lamb. Why don't we go over and kill the neighbor's one little lamb and roast it? And so they did. And even though the man's rich, even though he can have anything he wants, and David hears this, and he's absolutely incensed about the idea that somebody who can have anything he wants, instead of taking from his own herd, would go over and steal this little lamb from someone else. And he says, that is terrible, and that man deserves death, and he should be killed. And the prophet looks at him now that he's committed, because he hasn't realized this is a parable. He hasn't realized that this is something that's thrown alongside of. And Nathan looks at him and he says, you are the man. Pretty powerful. So whenever we talk about spiritual things, we have to kind of talk about them in this way. We talk about them in we can use parables to get it across. We can use analogies. We can use, comparisons, similes, metaphors, all this kind of thing. And so when we talk figuratively when we get into the spiritual realm almost all the time. And, it's not really concrete the way we talk. We talk in these metaphors, but the metaphors make sense to us. We can relate to it. We can understand it. And, if we say to somebody, your behavior stinks, well, most of us have smelled something that wasn't pleasant, and it's kind of easy to understand what we're driving at. It's interesting, Sigmund Freud said, analogies prove nothing. That's true. But they can make one feel more at home. Okay, there's an understanding that comes through analogy. Well, we have what we call the five senses, and there are various people who would argue that there are actually more than five senses. And the five that we talk about most, though, are sight and hearing and touch and taste and smell. And sight is something we can see it a long way off. We don't have to get close and personal in order to kind of see what's going on. Now, we can be close and personal, but sight is something that can take place a long way off. Hearing can take place a long way off as well. Touch, we have to get a little bit closer in order for touch to take place. We've got to be right there. Taste, that's getting pretty personal now because that's kind of internalized. Taste comes right in the mouth, and so it usually is something that we would choose to put in our mouth, not always, but that's where the taste takes place, and so it's a much more personal thing. And then we have smell, and smell is very close to us. It can come from far away. It can travel a long distance, but our experience of it is very close. And it's really hard to get away from. How do you escape it? With the touch, you can choose not to touch. With the sight, you can close your eyes. With the hearing, you can plug your ears. With the taste, you can don't bite. Don't get it in your mouth. But the smell is much harder to avoid. And the smell lingers as well. And the smell of the skunk or whatever it might be, it lingers significantly. And so that's why I say that our behavior, could be considered, something we see. It could be what we hear. It could be what we touch, what we taste. Jesus actually said you were the salt of the earth, which is kind of a taste thing. But when we get to the idea that our behavior has a smell associated with it, we recognize that this is something that's going to linger. It will permeate. It will be there for a long time. Well, I'd like to tell you 6 stories, and every one of these is very short, okay? Every one of them is a personal experience. I said that I grew up on a farm. We had sheep. Every year there were a few ewes who would have twin lambs, and they would love one and hate the other. And this was kind of unimaginable. Why has it happened this way? And they would spend a lot of time sniffing their lambs. And they knew that the smell of the good lamb, and they knew the smell of the bad lamb. And they would allow the good lamb to nurse, and if they caught the bad lamb nursing, they would run away, they would butt the lamb, and this was a perennial problem that we had. Fortunately, there's a thing called Vicks Vapor Rub. Okay? And if you take a nice dollop of Vicks Vapor Rub and you put it up each nostril of a ewe, they don't have a clue which is the good lamb and which is the bad lamb, because they can't smell anything except Vicks Vapor Rub. Now, there was occasionally the ewe who would say, if you're going to do that to me, I'm not going to have anything to do with either of these lambs. But more often than not, because they couldn't smell the difference, they accepted both of them as their mother. Story number 1. Story number 2. My wife and I were vacationing down in Jupiter, and we were driving through some little town close by, and we saw that there was a kind of a garage sale going on at a church, actually. It was so we stopped, and we went and looked at what they had, and it's a very interesting time that we spent there, and the people were telling us that they were raising money for some community service that they were doing, and they convinced us, and I think they were being absolutely truthful, that they really were making a difference in the community. So we probably bought a little more stuff than we should have bought, but it still wasn't that much. We put it in the car, and we'd handled all these old things that we'd been looking at, and my wife said, oh, we should get some wet wipes here and wipe our hands. And so she said, I don't know, we usually keep them in the car, can't find any. She digs around under the seat, pulls out a bag of them, and we wipe our hands. And I sniff my hand, and I go, boy, this really smells. What did we handle that's got such a bad smell? And she said, I don't know, get some more wet wipes and, wipe them a little more. And so we did, and then the smell just got worse. Well, finally we figured out that the wet wipes had gone rancid, and that they actually stank to high heaven. And we hadn't noticed it when we're rubbing these things on, and so now what do? Well, we go to the nearest place that has a public restroom, and we go in and we wash our hands, and we wash our hands, and we wash our hands, and we just couldn't get rid of the smell. It lingered, because smells can linger. Now, I'm talking about this in a context. I'm not just talking about smells. I'm saying that behavior creates something very akin to smell. And bad behavior lingers in the mind of others. Good behavior lingers too. In fact, I've often said that when somebody is going through a crisis and you come to help them, it's like what you do is magnified 10 times over. The simplest thing, when they're in deep, deep crisis, the simplest thing that you do is inflated by about 10 times. It's as if you gave them the whole world. But if what you do to them in their time of crisis is negative and drags them down, it gets inflated the same way, and it lingers, just like smells linger. Okay, the other story I want to tell about smell is that this is something that's kind of unique to my own spiritual background. In the Seventh-day Adventist Church, when we celebrate communion, we celebrate the foot washing that Christ did with his disciples at the Last Supper. And you probably have heard the story of how Jesus was going to be celebrating the Passover with his disciples. And in that day and age, people walked, and they either wore sandals or went barefooted, and they would go through these hot, dusty areas, and their feet would get dirty, and they would arrive at the host's place, and the host would have a servant there to wash their feet and get all that dust and dirt and grime off their feet. It was a dirty job for the host, but it made the guests feel so much better. And in the story of the Last Supper, Jesus and his disciples had come to celebrate the Passover, and there was nobody there to do the foot washing, nobody there to make the guests feel comfortable, and maybe that had been overlooked. Maybe Jesus had planned it that way, I don't know. But they had the meal, and still nobody had washed the feet, and none of the disciples would volunteer to do it because that was dirty work, and they were all planning to be part of the new kingdom that they were sure that Jesus was establishing. And so finally, when the meal was over, Jesus, it says, put a towel around him, and he began to wash their feet. And so various Christian groups in various ways go through this ritual. The Pope every year on Maundy Thursday washes the feet of a beggar. And this is the idea of humility, the idea of doing whatever tasks has to be done for the uplifting of humanity. Well, in the Seventh-day Adventist Church, they tie this with the communion service, and it's something that we do. And of course, it's not the same now as it was then, because people have had a shower that morning before they came to church, and their feet are not really dirty. It's a symbolic ritual that we go through. And so one time when I was about 18 years old, I would usually take part in this foot washing with somebody who was about my own age, but there was nobody my age there, and there was an old bachelor farmer who was there. And so me being very self-righteous and very good, I went up to him and I said, would you like to take part in the foot washing with me? Now this old bachelor farmer wore his socks all winter long. And so I'm there with a little basin of water ready to wash his socks. And, not his socks, his feet, I mean. And he took his socks off. And I thought I was going to lose it. The stench was just unbelievable. That these socks that had been worn, all winter long. And I just couldn't believe that it could smell that bad. But I went ahead and I turned my head and I kind of went through the ritual of washing his feet, and then I dried them off with a towel. And then as soon as he'd washed my feet, I was out of there, and I went to the nearest restroom and I washed my hands, and let me tell you, rotten wet wipes don't hold a candle to old bachelors, farmers' feet who've been in the same socks, forever. And so anyway, it gave me a whole new idea of what the humility might be, the humble service to humanity that Jesus was trying to get across. And it gave me a whole new appreciation of how bad smells can really be. Okay, just a couple more. I used to take my grandson to his daycare, and the people who ran the daycare were there, and I'd sometimes sit around and talk with him for 10 minutes or 5 minutes when I dropped him off just to be friendly and make sure he was settling in. And one of the women said, "My, what is that cologne you have on? That is amazing." And I said, "Well, it's called Sexy Secret. And you can get it at Ross, and it's only $10 a bottle." And she said, "I have to get that for my husband." I said, don't worry about it. Next time at Ross, I'll pick some up for you. And so I gave her some. Anyway, another day I'm shopping down in St. Cloud, excuse me. I'm moving from Nebraska to... Anyway, I was in St. Cloud with my wife, and we were in an antique store there. And a woman said to me, who was behind the counter, she said, could you just go over there and then walk from there to there? And I go, well, yeah, I guess, so I walk across. She said, would you mind walking back the other direction? And I'm thinking, what is she, is she looking at how many paces it is to measure something? What's going on? And she said, what is that cologne you're wearing? And I said, oh, that's, we found some cheap Dolce & Gabbana at Ross. That's the only place we buy. It's not Bloomingdale's. It's not those kind of places, Oh, she said, that's just wonderful. Well, one day we go into Ross. That's the end of that story, by the way. And she just thought this cologne was so great, she had to smell it, and she wanted me to walk past so she could smell it. One day we go into Ross, and lo and behold, there's a nice little cologne there that's called True Religion. And the True Religion clothing line, they actually produce cologne, or they did in the past, and it was in a little whiskey flask. My wife has a wicked sense of humor. She's probably just wicked. Maybe it's not just a sense of humor, but she hangs out with me, she'd have to be. But anyway, she thought this would really be great. She could just see this preacher man, with his little wine flask, or actually more whiskey flask, in his jacket pocket, and in some important meeting, you kind of take it out, and take the lid off, and they're going to wonder, is he going to swig this stuff right here? So she thought that was really great. Well, actually, the stuff smelled pretty good. Wasn't too bad. And so I put some on one day, and I went down to Walgreens, and I walk up to buy whatever it is that I'm going to buy, and the woman behind, the young woman, late teens, maybe early 20s, behind the desk, she said, oh man, that smells good. What is that fragrance? I said, that's True Religion. And all of a sudden, she gets this panicked look on her face, like, where's that button under the counter that I need to push, when I want security to come, And, it's just like, it just totally froze the conversation. And I said, that's True Religion. And then I said, no, that's the name of the fragrance, True Religion. It's the name of the fragrance. And it was kind of like, oh, boy. I thought I was dealing with somebody who was totally and completely crazy. Okay. As Sigmund Freud said, no analogy proves anything, but it can help to get the point across. It can make us feel more at home. It can make us understand a little bit more the significance or the lack of significance of something. And what I want to emphasize is that the way we behave has a huge impact on other people. And it creates an aroma that is either good or bad. It's either going to linger in a positive way or it's going to linger in a negative way. Barry talked a bit about about your principles. And I have to tell you that my vote is leave them as they are. I think they're fantastic. And I will also tell you that I've not memorized anybody else's statement of faith or anybody else's principles but yours, because I think they're that good. And so, I'm just here actually to remind you of what you already know, to remind you of what you already recognize and already believe, to remind you that it's doing the things that your principles talk about that are going to make the world a better place if you apply them, and in the absence of them, it's going to leave the world a worse place. So I'd just like to run through them with you because you know them all, this is nothing new, but this is somebody else who's on the outside looking in and saying, wow, that is really great. These principles are not only the means to the goal, they are goals in themselves. And so they play both roles. and they are the strategy by which you can make the whole world smell better. So what is it that's important? The inherent worth and dignity of every person. Justice, equity, and compassion in human relations. Acceptance of one another, and encouragement to spiritual growth in our congregations. A free and responsible search for truth and meaning. The right of conscience, and the use of the democratic process within our congregations and within society at large. The goal of, the right of conscience, the goal of the world community, number 6, peace, liberty, and justice for all. And finally, respect for the interdependent web of all existence of which we are a part. What I like about that last one particularly is it says, what you do impacts everyone. You're going to have a happier dog if you follow these principles. You're going to have happier neighbors if you follow these principles. You're going to have a society around you that is sustainable, where we will still have nature to look at and enjoy if you follow these principles. The world is going to smell a lot better. There was a statement that Robert Kennedy made, and I'm winding down now. He said, "Some men see things as they are and say, why? I dream things that never were and say, why not?" And so what I'd like to encourage you to do is to continue that dream and make sure you never lose it of what could be. Don't look at it and say why. Don't look at the world that is less than it could be and less than it should be and that is actually kind of stinky if you want to know the truth. Don't look at it that way and say, well, we're just stuck with it, but say, no, we're going to give it our best shot. We're going to dream things that never were and say, why not? So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to make the world smell better. Thank you.
Reverend James Coffin, thank you so much for these thoughtful words and for extinguishing the chalice. For closing words, I've actually readjusted some things here as I think about it. But I'm looking forward to seeing Tracy Barrett up here. And to that thought, I would like to say that when she's here or when somebody such as Reverend Coffin is here, join us in exploring life's deepest questions in a spiritually diverse and supportive and challenging community. We are excited.
For all that is our life, we sing our thanks and praise. For all life is a gift, which we are called to use to build the common good and make our own days glad.
to stay and join with us. To stay and join with us, we will offer coffee, and you can stay with us here in the structure, in the sanctuary.